So calm and quiet out here. Beautiful. A lot of snow. Damn cold. Woo. I feel like a lot of things have problems at minus 25. Woo-wee. Holy shit, wait a minute. Hello, folks, and welcome to another Trip Debrief, a post-adventure podcast where I deep dive on one of my recent trips in the backcountry for all of you logistics nerds to talk a little bit more about my planning process, where I camped, elevation gain and loss, and everything else that goes into planning one of the trips that I do in the backcountry. I started doing these not too long ago because right when I get back from a trip, it's fun to kind of deep dive and talk about what I just did in the backcountry, what went right, what went wrong, the gear that I used, what I would do different if I was going to go do it again. And just to share more information with you guys, because, I think over the years, people have asked me a lot to share more of the logistics for my trips so it can help them learn on how to plan a trip for themselves. Well, last night, literally at midnight, I just got back from a trip up in Colorado in the Rockies doing, the plan was to do a 2-night, 3-day trip to get up onto the Continental Divide and do a peak, climb a peak, which was James Peak, just over 13,000 feet. Get out and test some cold weather gear, do a little bit of training for myself because I have some big trips planned for this year where I need to get out in colder weather. I need to get into sub-zero temps, and I need to get out and test my climbing skills and my high altitude skills. So that's what this trip was all about. So last week, I headed up to Colorado to meet up with my buddy Jason to do a trip. The trip that I planned didn't exactly go as planned. We had to kind of shift it on the fly at the last minute, and that's kind of what I wanted to share today. So I'll share all the logistics of what I had planned on doing, kind of show you guys why I planned it, and then show you what we adjusted it to and what we did afterwards. So for this trip, not only did I have some deep winter backpacking gear, I also had my climbing gear because we were planning on climbing a 13,000 foot peak in the winter in sub-zero temps. I needed some technical gear to keep myself safe at those elevations and on those ridges of trying to climb James Peak. So if you guys want to check out my gear list of everything that I used for this trip, I'll leave a link down in my description box to my website, and you can see my full gear setup of everything that I took. Now, if you guys watched my recent video that I put out of some of my winter backpacking upgrades, I took just about everything on this trip except for my skis. Because I was flying, because of the type of trip we were doing, snowshoes were actually going to be a little bit more efficient for this trip. So I decided to leave my skis at home, and I used Jason's snowshoes when I got up to Colorado. But aside from that, all the gear that I talked about in last Friday's video, I took with me to test out. So the original plan was to get into an area I've heard it called a handful of things, South Boulder Creek. The actual trailhead that we started at was called the East Portal, also known as the Moffett Tunnels. So if you've ever been up in that area in Colorado, just kind of north of the Boulder area, there's a really famous spot called the Moffett Tunnels. That's where we were planning on doing a trip and where we could easily access James Peak and the Divide. So I mapped everything out on Onyx Backcountry. Not only was I able to kind of map out all of our objectives, with hiking and getting up onto the ridge and onto the peak, but because we were going to be doing some ice climbing, I also was able to use the climb tab to actually see some of the spots that we could do some ice climbing at. So if I zoom in here, the plan again was to get out on Friday morning, right here at the East Portal Trailhead, and hike out this trail to a section for some ice climbing. So if I turn on the little climbing thing here, you can see that right up here, really close to the Moffett Tunnels. This is the Moffett Tunnels, by the way. See this little section right here? These are train tunnels. The trains that cut through the divide, I believe. So there is a spot right here called the north facing wall where I had spent a little bit of time last year getting into some ice climbing, and I wanted to go back here and kind of sharpen my skills. So the north facing wall is just a small little waterfall that has some nice ice on it that you can do a handful of different routes. So the plan was to go there during the day, mess around for a little bit, and then take off into the valley and do some camping. So this little green spot right here was kind of our side quest. And then you can see the red here was our first night. So the original plan was to do just 1.9 miles. So with the little offshoot thing, 2 miles max for Friday to get out into this valley. Our elevation was going to be 757 feet. And I'll go ahead and show you kind of what the route looked like. So the plan was to go up into this valley. Now, if I kind of show everything from this spot, you can see up here, this is the divide. So that is the Continental Divide right there. If I kind of turn this way a little bit, that is James Peak right there, right at 13,307 feet. So the plan, again, was to go out on Friday night and go just 1.9 miles to this campsite that we had set kind of right at the base of the divide, right at the base of this elevation, these big mountains. So the first night at camp, we were going to be camping at 9,948 feet. And then the plan was to get up in the morning on Saturday and climb up to the divide on this trail, well, partly trail, and then traverse up this ridge onto the Continental Divide up here, and then basically traverse that entire divide all the way over where it goes right up to James Peak. So for Saturday, the plan was to do, let me hit this real quick. Camp to James Peak was going to be 5.5 miles, 3,739 feet of elevation gain, and basically we were going to be doubling that, right? So we'd be going up, tagging the peak, and then coming down. So right at 11 miles total, 39 feet of elevation gain. So 39 feet of elevation loss back to that camp that we had set, our base camp right here. Camp on Saturday night, and then get up in the morning and then hike that 1.9 miles back to the East Portal Trailhead and complete our trip. So the reason that we had chose this line right here to go up for all you logistics nerds is because it's winter, it's in Colorado, and it is, risk of avalanche. So if I turn on the slope angle, you can see from where I routed all of this purple, blue, red. This is all pretty dangerous avalanche risk area. So, all the way over to the left, you can see a lot of that purple and red, especially like right up on the divide, right? You can see all of this, which means high avalanche risk. So not something you necessarily want to be hiking on. You don't want to be doing a trail that's cutting across one of these super steep slopes. So we were able to pick kind of the safest line, which stayed in the green here, which is why we kind of came up through here. Even like right here, you can see there's this little bitty ridge that stays in the green. I mean, there's purple and blue right on the side, so kind of scary, but getting up there and then all the way over on the divide, it was all pretty safe. So that was the plan. But what happened? Well, on Thursday night into Friday morning, a big storm front moved through. Super heavy winds, the temp dropped, we had some heavier snowstorms, and up here at elevation where we were going to be on Saturday morning, we're talking wind gust up to 70 to 80 miles an hour with a wind chill at negative 25. So you add in kind of these higher peaks, higher elevations, deep snow, negative 25, super high wind gust, did not seem safe at all. So we ended up kind of setting out the day and not going out on Friday morning to start our trip. We ended up hanging out for quite a bit at Jason's house, getting some stuff together, kind of figuring out kind of a second option. And by the evening, the wind actually died down quite a bit. It was still very cold, but the wind died down. It was a little bit too late to actually get out and set up camp at that spot. And the next morning, it was still going to be high wind gusts, still super low temps. So we ended up driving out to the east portal just as we had planned on Friday evening around 4 or 5 o'clock. And we found that it was safe enough to at least go up and do some ice climbing. So it was kind of cool. We actually did some night hiking in the snow. We got out to this spot, went up to the top of the falls, set our anchors, dropped our rope, and then we did a couple of runs on the ice. This is the second time I've ever been ice climbing, but this time was kind of amplified because it was dark. We were using headlamps, which just kind of added to the excitement, added to the fun, and we had a good time. We were only able to get a couple runs in before it was just kind of too late. We ended up driving back to Jason's house and coming up with a plan B on the fly. And what we chose to do was we ended up going over to the Winter Park area. So for all you ski nerds that spend a lot of time in Colorado, you'll know there's 40 that kind of twists through the mountains, through the divide, and drops down to Winter Park. When I did the Continental Divide Trail in 2021, I actually came out at, I think it's Berthod, I can't say it right, Berthod Pass, which is where the Continental Divide comes down. Actually, you can see it right here. So there it is, Berthod Pass trailhead. So I came through all this, came over the divide here, and popped out right here. So we were on the other side of the divide. Weather was totally different. And we ended up coming down here and doing a trip, starting out at the Second Creek trailhead. On the Second Creek Trail, because there was a peak that was not too far up that seemed a lot safer, which was right up here. You can kind of see my blue line, called Twin Cones. Right here, which set right at 12,050 feet. So if we look at the slope angle of everything, why we chose this is because if I turn on my slope angle, you can see a lot safer. So yeah, you got some purples and blues and reds over in certain areas on really steep slopes, but going up and tagging that peak in specific was a hell of a lot safer of an environment to be in. Not to mention winds were much lower. We didn't have super high gusts throughout the night and throughout the day. And it actually allowed us to get into some deeper snow and camp at even a higher elevation. So after getting everything loaded up, getting ready to go, we ended up getting out pretty late to start our trip. We drove out here to the other side of the divide and started here at the Second Creek trailhead. And for that first night, we ended up only doing 1.2 miles, which is a little bit less than what we were going to do at the East Portal, and pretty high elevation. We started at 10,600 feet. So right off the bat, we were starting at a higher elevation than what we had originally planned on camping at. But just doing that 1.2 miles with only 844 feet of elevation was quite a bit when you're considering a heavier pack, when you're considering super heavy snow. Even with snowshoes, we were still post-holing. But we were able to get up here past this little hut. There's kind of a little famous hut up here that people will cross-country ski and stuff like that too, called the Broom Hut. We actually camped up here right at, let me see if I can get it up here. Yeah, right at 11,443 feet. So we're actually able to camp up much higher, but with less of a risk of high winds, crazy low temps, and just a dangerous area to be at because of slope angle and avalanche risk. So we ended up getting up there kind of a little later into the evening because we didn't get an early start. We ended up getting to camp right at about 4:30, 5 o'clock. We packed down a big area of snow, dug out some pits around our tent. That way, you know, the reason for doing that is to be able to set up in the morning and actually put your boots on and not have to be, you know, post-holing in snow when you're trying to put your shoes or your boots on. We set everything up, ate some dinner, boiled some water for the next morning, and hit the hay. That night, it got down to 5 degrees, so it was a -3 with the wind chill, so it felt like -3. Had a pretty good night in the backcountry, and ended up waking up at 7 a.m. because our plan was to be going by 9 to be able to get up to Twin Cones, hit the peak, come down, break down camp, and then get all the way back to the trailhead because I had to fly home on Sunday. So it's totally like through our trip for a complete whirlwind. So the next morning we got up. We left everything at camp, boiled some water, had some coffee, ate some breakfast, and then we ended up doing 1.2 miles with 589 feet of elevation gain, which doesn't sound like much, but again, snowshoes, deep snow. It's a workout up to Twin Cones. As you can see, the trail right here kind of meanders through the woods, and not a lot of trees, kind of barren. You're still above tree line, but right when you really break above tree line, it was kind of very Arctic tundra-y. And right when we got up to this little junction right here, as you can see kind of in this, I guess, elbow in the trail goes up to the ridge. Well, because of all the snow, because you can't really see, we ended up not taking the trail at this area and actually ended up traversing over this slope right here. Again, because if I turn on that slope angle, you can see it's very safe. We're in the green, so all of this was quite safe. And then we ended up kind of coming right up through here, getting up close to the ridge, and then running that all the way to Twin Cones. Right there. We got up here, kind of onto this whole Arctic tundra area. We still got into some cold temps, some high winds. We had wind gusts up to about 45 miles an hour, and the temp got down to a -11 with the wind chill. So still pretty damn cold, still pretty gnarly winds, especially when you're that exposed. But we got up, we tagged that summit right up at 12,050 feet. What was really cool about being up here is at the Twin Cones summit, I was looking over at the divide up here. So I could actually see where in 2021 I was hiking over. And the amount of snow up there was just crazy to think about. When I was there and there was no snow, weather wasn't great, still cold, but no snow. It was pretty wild to be able to see that, see where the Continental Divide runs. So we tagged that peak. Then we ended up hiking the 1.9 miles, 2 miles back down to camp. We got down to camp at about 10:30 maybe, and we broke down camp, boiled some more water, had a snack, got everything in our pack, and then ended up hiking the 1.2 miles back down to the Second Creek campground, or Second Creek trailhead. It says campground there. I'm not sure why it says campground. I never saw a campground. There's just a trailhead on the side of 40. So got back down there, got back to the car, set up, took all our gear off, drove back to Jason's house. I was there for maybe an hour. I took a shower, packed up all my stuff, went to the airport, got on a plane, and flew home. And I got home last night at midnight. So it was a pretty fast back-to-back trip that didn't necessarily go as planned, but still got to get out and get after some of those objectives. So got to do some ice climbing, to do some training. Got to get out in some sub-zero temps and test some new gear. Got to go tag a summit. Wasn't 13,000 feet, it was 12,000 feet, but still a winter summit in the Rockies. So overall, I think a pretty great trip. Now, as far as like little things, you guys might be asking, like, what about water? I only ended up taking out a Nalgene, so 32 ounces of water with me. And then as far as what we did for water, it was melting snow. So when you're in environments like this, when you have that much snow, you're basically just melting snow, right? You got all your water around you. You just have to melt it. So there wasn't any water sources that we could really access. It was just melting snow when we needed it. As far as the temperatures, getting down to, like I said, it was a -3 with the wind chill that night. All of my gear worked out great. The new quilt worked out great. The new jacket. The tent that I took out, the Big Agnes Copper Spur, if you guys watched my video from last week, it did pretty decent. There are some things that I liked about it, and there were some things that I didn't like about it, which I'll end up talking about in a later video. The stove did phenomenal. And overall, I was comfortable. I never got cold. I was plenty warm throughout the night. It was warm in the morning. The only time I was actually really cold was at the summit of Twin Cones. But honestly, I wouldn't really do anything different or change anything as far as what my gear setup was. Now, this trip was really training for me to get me prepared to go out and do a lot of these other bigger trips that I have coming up over the next handful of months, and especially the big trip that I'm going to be doing in Pakistan in August. All this is just training, preparation, and getting out and harnessing my skills in the backcountry. So again, if you guys want to check out that full gear list of everything that I use, not only my backpacking gear, but also my climbing gear, I'll leave that link down below. And if you guys enjoy these trip debriefs, getting more into the logistics and talking about kind of how I planned something and how something went right and how something went wrong and all these little things, let me know down below. Give me some feedback on what you guys think of these, or what would you like to see more of in these post-adventure trip debriefs. Let me know. Give me some feedback. Guys, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I hope you're taking care of each other. I love you. And as always, thanks for watching.